Okay, so we've all been there, right? You see a photo and you're like, whoa, is that what I look like?
It's such a common experience.
Definitely. It can be jarring, to say the least. And that's what we're diving into today.
Yeah, using the source you sent us, which, by the way, has a really intriguing title.
Right. Silang Kimi, it translates to the pasted text.
Hmm, makes you think.
Definitely makes me wonder if it's hinting at this feeling of photos not quite capturing the real us. But anyway, the source dives right into visual media.
Oh yeah, all those glossy magazines, Instagram, the works.
It's like we're constantly bombarded with these perfect images.
And the source really emphasizes that and how those images are usually pretty unrealistic, let's face it.
Totally. So I'm curious, how does all this exposure to perfection actually affect us psychologically?
Well, the source cites a bunch of research that basically connects heavy social media use with body dissatisfaction.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's deeper than just feeling pressure to look a certain way, right?
Yeah. Right. It's like our brains actually start to perceive our own bodies differently, more negatively,
Yeah.
because of all the comparison.
Wow, it's almost like those images warp our perception of what's normal or attractive.
Exactly. And this is where the whole cognitive distortions thing comes in.
Oh yeah, the source mentioned that. What exactly does that mean?
Basically, our brains can sort of magnify perceived imperfections in photos. Like, we fixate on things others wouldn't even notice.
So it's not just the cameras that can be unflattering. Our own minds are messing with us too.
Exactly. And the source gives a great example. That thing where you obsess over, like, a crooked smile in a picture.
Oh, or a double chin. Been there.
Right. But those things might be barely noticeable to anyone else. It's like our own internal critic is distorting reality.
That's so interesting. I know I've totally fixated on things in photos that no one else even seemed to see. It's like our own internal lens is creating the distortion.
That's a great way to put it. And this ties in with what the source calls body dysmorphia in photography. It's kind of like that, but more extreme.
Okay, I see. So it's like a spectrum. But I'm also curious about the actual technical stuff, like what the source calls camera distortion. Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. So it's all about how certain choices, in terms of the camera and lenses, can subtly change how we look in photos.
Like even without filters or editing, just the equipment itself?
Yep. Think about a fisheye lens, for example.
Okay, that makes sense. It stretches and distorts everything. But our everyday cameras aren't that extreme, right?
Hmm.
So what kind of subtle stuff are we talking about?
Well, the source specifically talks about focal length. Like a shorter focal length, what you'd use for a selfie, can actually make your features look a bit bigger, more rounded, especially towards the center of your face.
Oh, interesting. So even just the lens we use can change things. Makes you wonder how many of our selfies have been subtly distorted by our phones.
Definitely something to consider. And this source points out that even different lenses, even with the same focal length, can render features a little differently. It just reminds us that what we see in a photo isn't always the whole truth.
Right, it's not a perfect reflection of reality. So we've got our brains distorting things, cameras adding their own spin, and then of course there's social media with all the filters and editing apps.
Oh yeah, the source calls out Facetune specifically, and those flawless hashtags.
It's everywhere these days. And while those tools can be fun, the source raises a good point. They contribute to these crazy beauty standards that are basically impossible to achieve.
Totally. It's like when we see so many digitally perfected images, it becomes even harder to feel good about our unedited selves.
Right, it's almost like setting ourselves up for disappointment. See all the flawless faces online, then look in the mirror and think, ugh, why didn't I look like that?
It's a tough cycle to break. And the source is really clear that this constant comparing can mess with how we see ourselves, both online and offline. It's a big challenge in today's world.
No kidding. I'm curious, have you ever personally felt that shift? Like, after scrolling through social media, you suddenly become way more critical of your appearance?
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to avoid that feeling of comparison when you're looking at all those perfectly posed and filtered photos. It can really make you hyper-aware of every little thing.
So true. It makes you wonder if we're all just setting ourselves up for a constant barrage of self-criticism. But thankfully, the source doesn't just leave us hanging with all this negativity, right? They actually offer some advice on how to start overcoming this negative self-image and embracing how we look in photos.
Yeah, they do. And a lot of it comes down to self-compassion and what they call mindful self-acceptance.
Okay, that sounds good in theory, but what does it actually mean? How do we put that into practice?
Well, it's about being more present in your body, noticing your thoughts and feelings about your appearance, but without judging them, and then actively focusing on things you like about yourself.
So it's about shifting the focus, right? Instead of beating ourselves up over every little thing, we try to appreciate our bodies for what they are.
Exactly. They even say that our bodies are our own masterpieces, not cookie-cutter molds.
Yeah.
Embracing our individual quirks and features is what makes us truly beautiful.
I love that. It's about celebrating individuality rather than striving for some generic ideal. And I feel like that ties in with what the source says about confidence.
Oh, for sure. They basically say confidence is the best accessory. When we feel good about ourselves, it shows in our posture, our expression, everything.
Totally. It's like that inner confidence shines through, making us more radiant and authentic in photos. And I think people are drawn to that way more than some standard of physical perfection.
Definitely. The source even links it back to having a healthy relationship with self-image and photography. Photos are about capturing moments, not flaws, and we're so much more than just a snapshot.
Such a good reminder. Photos should be about celebrating life, not fueling insecurities.
It's funny, the source even gets into specifics about what people tend to fixate on, like
Mhm.
wrinkles,
Oh, yeah.
blemishes, even like the shape of our noses.
Yeah, those are definitely common insecurities. I've caught myself zooming in on stuff like that in photos before.
Totally. But the source kind of encourages a perspective shift, you know?
Hmm, interesting. Like, how?
Well, they say these things, these imperfections, are actually part of what makes us unique, part of our story.
That's a good point. Like, instead of seeing them as flaws, we could see them as, I don't know, marks of character, like signs of a life lived. It's about the whole package, not just the perfect parts.
Exactly. The source even suggests that sometimes those so-called imperfections can actually make us more beautiful.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. How do they explain that?
Well, they talk about how wrinkles can reflect a life well lived, full of laughter, experiences.
Mm.
Freckles can add a touch of whimsy, and even a crooked smile can convey warmth and authenticity.
I love that. It's like finding beauty in the unexpected, the things that make us different.
Right. It reinforces the idea that beauty isn't about fitting into some narrow mold, but expressing your individuality.
It's so powerful, shifting the focus from flawlessness to authenticity. And speaking of, I wonder what the source says about aging. How does that tie into all this? Especially with photos.
It's a big one, for sure. A lot of people struggle with it. But the source basically encourages us to see those changes as like signs of wisdom, experience, a life fully lived.
It's a beautiful way to look at it, reframing aging as a natural, even a beautiful part of life.
Exactly. It's about celebrating the stories our faces tell, the lines that show our laughter, our tears, all those experiences that have shaped us.
Instead of trying to erase them, right? Like it's something to be ashamed of.
Exactly. They also talk about self-care, but not in a like chasing perfection kind of way. More about doing things that make you feel good.
So, like the basics, eating healthy, getting enough sleep, managing stress, all that stuff.
Exactly. Nurturing yourself from the inside out.
It makes sense. When you feel good, it shows, right? And probably affects how you feel about yourself in photos, too.
Totally. Oh, and they also talk about surrounding yourself with positive influences, like on social media, for example. They're pretty clear that it can be a toxic environment.
Oh, absolutely. It's so easy to get caught in that comparison trap, scrolling through perfect images and feeling bad about yourself.
So the source suggests being mindful of who you follow, what content you're consuming. Find things that uplift you rather than bring you down.
Curate your online experience to be more supportive and empowering.
Exactly. And remember, you have the power to choose what you focus on.
This reminds me of the source also talked about self-expression in photography, which I thought was cool, like encouraging us to experiment with different styles, poses, expressions. Find what feels authentic to you.
It's about having fun with it,
Yeah.
not taking it all so seriously, and using photography as a way to explore, discover yourself.
Yeah, when it's less about the perfect image and more about capturing a feeling, a moment, those photos tend to be the best anyway, more genuine.
Absolutely. The source also had some really good practical tips for dealing with those negative thoughts that pop up when you see a photo you don't love.
Oh man, I need those tips. It's so easy to spiral. What did they say?
Basically, challenge those thoughts. Replace them with positive affirmations. So instead of focusing on what you see as a flaw, try to find something you like about the photo or about yourself in the photo.
Oh, okay. So instead of, ugh, my nose looks huge, it's, hey, my hair looks amazing in this picture.
That's the idea. And remind yourself that everyone has imperfections. They don't diminish your worth or beauty.
So true. It's like being kinder to yourself.
And they even suggest practicing gratitude for your body. It's easy to take it for granted, but appreciating all it does for you can really shift your perspective.
I like that. It's not just an object to be judged, it's this incredible vessel that lets us experience life.
Exactly. And it's not about some overnight transformation. It's about gradual shifts in your thinking, your behavior.
Progress, not perfection.
Right. You'll still have moments of insecurity, self-doubt, but those don't have to define you.
Totally. You can acknowledge those feelings without letting them take over.
And they also say, if you're really struggling, there's no shame in seeking professional help. Therapists, counselors, they can give you tools to cope.
It's a good reminder that you don't have to go through this alone.
For sure. And patience and self-compassion are key. Change takes time.
It's a journey. Embracing that journey, trusting that with time and effort, you can build a more loving relationship with yourself.
I love that. Speaking of journeys, I'm curious what the source says about cultural norms and societal pressures. How those affect our self-perception.
Yeah, that's a big one. It feels like so much of how we see ourselves is shaped by those external forces.
Absolutely, and the source is pretty clear. Challenge those norms. Redefine beauty for yourself. They remind us beauty is diverse, it's subjective. There's no one right way to look.
I love that. Break free from those expectations and embrace your own unique beauty.
Exactly. It's not about fitting a mold. It's about expressing your authentic self.
So powerful, it's about reclaiming your power, defining beauty on your own terms. But how do we actually do that? Challenge those societal norms, I mean. Did they give any advice?
Yeah, they talked about finding role models, mentors, who embody that positive, healthy relationship with their bodies, with themselves.
That makes a lot of sense. Seeing other people who are confident and comfortable in their own skin can be so inspiring. It can help you challenge your own negative perceptions.
Exactly. Surround yourself with people who support you, uplift you, and help you see the beauty in yourself and others.
That's a wonderful thought. And it really seems like the source is driving home the point that we're not alone in this.
Definitely not. There are people and resources out there to help you along the way. And it's important to remember that we're all works in progress. And that's okay.
That's a good reminder. It's about celebrating our individuality and embracing that journey of self-discovery.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways you think our listeners should hold on to? So many good points, right? But I think one of the biggest takeaways from this whole deep dive is that true beauty, it really does come from within. The source keeps coming back to that.
Yeah, it's not about chasing some external ideal. It's about self-love, self-acceptance.
Exactly. And that's not some end goal you reach. It's a process, a journey.
Right, it's ongoing. And I love how the source really emphasizes that we have the power to redefine beauty for ourselves.
Yeah. Challenge those societal pressures, those narrow definitions. Beauty is way more multifaceted than that, and it's always evolving too.
Totally. And honestly, celebrating what makes each of us unique, that's way more fulfilling than trying to fit some impossible mold.
100%. And as we wrap up, I think the big thing to remember is this is a process. You're not going to achieve perfect self-acceptance overnight.
It takes time.
It does. But you can continually work on those negative thoughts, cultivate a more compassionate relationship with yourself.
And that's what it's all about, right? Progress, not perfection.
You got. And give yourself grace along the way.
It's a journey. We'll all have those moments of insecurity, you know?
We will. But they don't have to define you.
And I think that's a really important point for our listener to hear. You are more than how you look in photos. Your worth comes from so much more than that.
Couldn't agree more. It's about your character, your values, your impact on the world. Those are the things that truly matter.
So beautifully said. What a powerful message. You are more than just a snapshot. You are beautiful just as you are. And your true beauty, it shines from within.
Absolutely. Embrace your individuality, celebrate your uniqueness, and let that light shine.
And hey, if you're ever feeling down about a photo, think back to everything we talked about today. Challenge those negative thoughts, find something positive to focus on, and remember, you are amazing just the way you are. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the material, so feel free to reach out with any questions. Until next time.